Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, and here with my co-host who is brimming with news on the exact day that this is getting published, McNulty.
Thanks, Mark. On today's episode, we'll be catching up with Vice President of OneDrive and SharePoint Program Management, Omar Shahine. Omar should be well known to this audience. He's been a real prominent figure who's been steering OneDrive and SharePoint for a good number of years. So we're going to be talking with Omar about Ignite, but also about how he's doing, what's been going on in the world, in his world, and how that all intersects with the crazy and wonderful world of OneDrive and SharePoint.
We know that you will hear in his voice, if you don't already know Omar, he's a very mindful leader, and fortunately for us, he leads a lot of the different product groups that we often talk about, OneDrive and SharePoint, and what the team is doing with Microsoft Teams, what they're doing with Microsoft Stream. A lot of work that this team is involved with, and he's a great leader. We want to drill into the most recent Microsoft Ignite, which is happening right now if you're listening to this on day one. A lot of announcements came out from his team that Chris and I are helping to amplify, and it'd be great to get top of mind what he's been thinking about, the strategy and design about those features. So you'll hear we're going to ask him questions about Project Cortex. We're going to ask him questions about this evolution of SharePoint lists we call Microsoft lists. And we'll get into some specifics around preparing for education, talking about this new Microsoft Stream 2.0, which we're calling internally, which is really just another big set of innovation, and some of the things that are very poignant in the role that SharePoint plays in Microsoft Teams. So, Chris, I just have to ask you, you've worked with a number of different leaders in this space, and Omar's no new kid on the block, but any anecdotes of working with Omar and seeing how he guides his team?
Well, the thing I would say about Omar is, he is a developer at heart, and I think he has made a very successful transition away from developing software and towards shaping the development of programs to developing people. In my experience, he takes great care to sit down and use the tools, use technology to help amplify his connection to people in the organization. He really is focused on, employee wellness and well-being. Back in the days when we were all in this town, what was the name of it? Red something?
Red distance in the red cloud sun.
On the Redmond campus, those of us who are in the product marketing organization, we frequently touch down within the building 34, where the program managers work, where Omar works. And from time to time, between touchdown space and people, I have to work with, I frequently find myself directly across the hall from Omar. Omar is a very thoughtful and caring person, and he is, I think, wise to recognize that one of the best ways to handle me is by gentle teasing about my sports affiliations or whatever else happens to be on my mind that day. He's just a great person to work with, and I've gotten to share stages with him at conferences, and it's a real pleasure to see kind of the thoughtful, detailed way he approaches leading the team. What are some of your observations?
Yeah, I was going to take a community observation. I have, as an individual, really enjoyed, seeing him really grow into his role and seeing him become a new person that Jeff Teeper really leans on in a positive way to help not only guide the team, as a top down, but really to take the bottom up and really take in the feedback to help guide with what's best for the team. Everybody's focused on what's best for the product, and there's a lot of input and channels there. But to know that there is a trusted approach that he takes that's both trusted up to Jeff Teeper and probably up and even above that, but also then more importantly, trusted down into his team to then execute on the right things with the right guidance, the right insight, the right feedback. From a community perspective, people may know him as the sticker guy. When the new icons came out, he put a real lens on making them tangible and wasn't shy about sharing. So he printed out a ton of stickers. And I think what that resonates, not only is he willing to create and share, but he also has a design aesthetic that I think he really brings at a leadership role that shines the light of importance on design of product, the approach to how we build it, and of course to how consumers consume it. The look and feel of OneDrive and SharePoint these days, and of course their instances as you experience them in Teams or with Power Platform or whatnot, there is guidance and a real lens to do more design work. Both design that looks beautiful, design that's accessible, design that functionally works so that it's a great experience. But I do think it starts a lot with Omar, and I think you see it when you meet him. You'll hear it in his voice when you hear him describe things, and you just know we've turned that corner from being not design focused to being design focused, and I would have to attribute to him a good portion of that. Another
thing just I would recommend is Omar's going to talk about his blog, which you can get to at omar.shahine.com, which we'll talk about in the show notes. He's a real gadget geek.
He is.
On his blog, he's fairly common. He appreciates really good design, to your point. And unlike what you might expect for a leader in a technology enterprise like Microsoft, he definitely checks in on, this new headphone or the latest battery charger for an iPhone. But he also has an article that he wrote this year about sandals. And he wrote them in January, which even in the Pacific Northwest, it takes some dedication to be thinking about sandals in early January.
If I were to tell you that I was wearing my Crocs inside right now, do you think that would hit his level of design competence?
I think it might depend on the color and the fitness to task. If we have time, we'll have to ask him about that. But
for sure.
There's a lot going on at Ignite. There's a lot to pay attention to on today's broadcast. So I think it's time, Mark, for us to get right to it. So up next on the Intro Zone, we are really happy to be welcoming back Omar Shahine. And for the first time since his prior engagement on the Intro Zone, Omar, you have a new job title that we'd like to share with the audience. You are Vice President of OneDrive and SharePoint Program Management. So let me just say congratulations. And what does that actually mean?
Thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to be back on the podcast. I'm obviously a big fan and listener. Great to be doing this again. And thanks for the congratulations. It's obviously a privilege to lead this team. And I think the new title sort of communicates to our customers and within Microsoft, I think the role OneDrive and SharePoint play in Microsoft 365 and the growth of the team over the last couple of years. We've continued to grow our business and we have a wonderful team of program managers. At Microsoft, program managers are kind of the people who help assemble the product, take feedback from customers, think of the art of the possible, partner with engineering and design, marketing, legal, all the disciplines within Microsoft that are involved in creating a product. And so it's been an honor to lead this team for the last couple of years. And I'm just so fortunate to continue to get to do that and spend some time today talking to you about some of the work that we've been doing.
Omar, I think there's a lot of nuance in how you work with that broad of a team. You mentioned engineering. You mentioned working with designers. Of course, we're privileged to work with you and both get guidance and see how you guide others. In the context of this podcast, just kicking off, one of the things that we have found that we ask a lot of our guests, and just that I think we are asking each other, is something that we saw you ask publicly that I thought would be interesting just to get your take on that common question, how are you doing? So we want to know, how is Omar doing? To see it through the lens of what you put out on your blog post, which is called Omar Knows. You had a nice blog that was essentially posing that question that detailed out, I think, a lot of how you think about it and answer it. And I also think reflects on how you think about and guide your team. So how are you doing?
Thanks for asking. I found that to be one of the most challenging and nuanced questions to have to answer over the last couple of months. It's pre-COVID. It was pretty common for us all to say, how are you doing? And, the typical response would be, I'm doing great, or, I'm doing okay. It's so, when I hear that question, I tend to think to myself, well, I'm not doing great all the time. This is a challenging time for many of us. And we're all dealing with I say we all share sort of a global set of challenges, but we're also all dealing with lots and lots of unique circumstances, whether you're a parent, a new parent of really small children, a parent of growing elementary, middle school, high school age children, or a parent who has kids going off to college, or maybe even who are now adults having graduated, someone with no kids, family who just got a pet. There's just lots of uniqueness. And then we have, of course, lots of challenges, even as recent as the last couple of days around the West Coast, the fires, racial issues this country is facing, issues around social justice. I personally had a death in the family a couple of months ago. And, the normal course of business was to grieve in a way that we're sort of used to doing. But a lot of us that have faced sick or ailing parents, family members, or even deaths in our families have been unable to do the things we would expect to do that help us as human beings sort of move on. I think a lot about just how my team does and how our customers are doing. And it's just been a very challenging time. I think there's optimistic ways to look at this. But I think the reality is each day can be a real struggle for people in my team and people outside my team.
I was just thinking as you were describing it, there has always been the notion of a work-life balance. It seemed in the past to keep it more separate. You had your work and life and they didn't blend quite as much, or you didn't share as much. But I think as this remote work, not only does the question beg, hopefully an honest response and an honest interest in asking the question, but to know that you are maybe a little bit closer to people or are going to get a little bit more of an honest response because you're maybe closer and exposed to each other a little bit more than in the past.
It's interesting to hear you reflect on that. I have been both burdened and privileged by needing to drive across the country there and back twice this summer to get kids from school. And it's exhausting. I did emerge from that realizing that what we all have in common, I think, and I hope, stronger than some of the divisions that we've been having. But I think you're totally right, though. It all takes a toll. The ways that we're working and the things that we're contending with in our personal lives and across the globe, I'm not doing as well as I used to be doing. I'm frequently far more short-tempered with members of my own family and household than I would like to be, and wish I could get caught up on my sleep. And I think we're all reflecting that in ways that are meaningful to us. And I really appreciate kind of your candor in putting that blog post out there.
Yeah, we'll put a link out in the show notes because I think it's a good read and it'll probably resonate with other things that you are either thinking or have read, from different viewpoints. And I think Omar's got a really unique one. So Omar, before we crack into the Ignite news, which I know is a bit of a 180, one thing that I think Chris mentioned that is on top of minds of a lot of people is the going back to school notion. My oldest is going off to college. We know that that's just a small look into the realities of people really coming online, doing real classwork and engaging in very different ways, not necessarily the learning, but the how. And we wanted to tap your brain to learn how you and your team are preparing the service. And then I thought we've got one area of investment specifically to not just running the service, but around the new education templates that the team is publishing for SharePoint. But you want to give us a sense of that preparing for back to school, and then now that we're kind of in it, or at least coming through the spike, what's it looking like these days?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I guess, one of the most interesting things about running a service, any service really, is you don't really think of it as a limited resource. Like when people think of the cloud, when you think of the services that you as a individual use and consume every day, you don't think of it running out. But the reality is the cloud is just a bunch of machines and power and network cabling. There are very much finite constraints. And so when COVID first hit, I think our team really rallied to analyze, detail, and understand every single constraint in real time. Those things were changing in real time, which made the job even more challenging. We made it through that spring, but we knew that the fall would be an even bigger challenge because we knew schools would have more time to prepare for remote and hybrid learning and build their plans. And so we had to move pretty quickly to building out capacity, to working with our partners, to make sure we had the right equipment available, that we understood the this, the scale of what, governments, countries, school districts, private schools, public schools were all planning without having, a two-way conversation with everybody. We are right now in that big buildup to the peak. The peak is bigger than any other peak we've experienced, but so far, it seems to be that we are managing to keep up with demand, which is great. The second thing is, education has always been a part of what our team does, but I think that the experience we're all having with many people who have children who are experiencing this and the parents who are watching their children's experience this, like the sense of purpose and the sense of impact is very different than at least I think I've ever seen at Microsoft. Knowing that we are like the power company for a lot of students and their parents and their families, where we're providing a sort of critical service that is necessary for continuing to educate our children and the young adults that are out there in schools is, I think, giving everybody a real renewed sense of why they took on these jobs and why they feel so lucky to have these jobs, to sort of empower the teachers, the administrators out there to provide education. It's not ideal. As a parent, I'd say I'm learning a lot myself. Both my kids go to a school that uses a wide variety of technology. They use Zoom, they use Google, they use Microsoft 365. They actually use all of these services in a way that I don't think any one human sat down and architected for coherence. And so it's interesting just watching the different tools. And I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, watching them navigate different subjects and topics and teachers and all that. It's a very interesting experience. And, obviously our goal at Microsoft is to make sure that we can continue to provide the right platform for education both today and tomorrow, so that our products continue to evolve with the state of the art, the needs, and sort of help people get through this.
I know one of the things that you did recently was that your team published, I think, about 3 or 4 education site templates. And maybe as myopic as that is, just from similar to or based on what you were just sharing, it is one example where we're starting to deliver alongside teams for education. It's very specific for education. There's a number of things that different workloads do. And SharePoint has often approached it a bit more agnostic or horizontal. But I think with the investment that your team is putting ahead with these education templates that we deliver, alongside the notion of just creating your own custom templates, can you speak to maybe the level of investment and why we did that in this space?
It's a great question. SharePoint is an amazing platform and application for helping organize content, communicate and share content. And we've, over the last couple of years, invested a lot in our communication sites and home sites for organizations to provide, beautiful websites that their employees can use to consume information that corporations want to communicate to their employees. And for education, we started to look to our existing partner ecosystem and templating tools to create what we think of as sort of good examples for how schools can use SharePoint, the application and the platform, to also help their students and teachers. In this case, particularly around teachers and staff, to stay organized. So we delivered some EDU templates. And our goal really is, one, to learn. Learning is a big part of how we build great products at Microsoft. And so having the ability for schools to take our templates and then customize them, brand them, use news, use global wayfinding as a way to give us feedback. I'd say, again, I mentioned my role earlier as a sort of parent in this situation. I'm watching how our kids' school has a really difficult time getting things to the students and the parents around like links to this and links to that. And here's the health check app. And here's what you need to know for next week. And here are the materials for art. And, having fast, responsive web pages that are easy to navigate, I think, is a critical part of helping to solve that problem for staff and for students.
Omar, really, really helpful to me, and I'm sure to our audience, to kind of hear how we are approaching our response to educational needs moving forward. And we'd like to kind of pivot to talking about some of the education that we're delivering this week here as part of Microsoft Ignite. And so, one thing that, is near and dear to my heart is we're making an announcement of the first general availability for a product coming out of Project Cortex, and that is SharePoint syntax. I would love to kind of get your thoughts and perspective on what this announcement is and what it means for our customers.
Yeah, great thing to talk about. We are incredibly excited to bring that to market. We've obviously been working on it for a long time. And Chris, you've been involved in many ways in shaping the product and defining the strategy and delivering a lot of customer success. I mentioned earlier about how much we learn through our customers. This is very much a customer-focused product investment from our team, where lots of customers told us about some of the challenges they have with ingesting information, whether it's forms or large-scale approaches they have for taking in documents, and the technology advancements over the last couple of years with OCR and artificial intelligence. And then, of course, the incredible capabilities in SharePoint around document content management, and now automation through products like Power Automate. Taking all of these things together and producing a customer, focused solution has really been what's driven the team to get to this point. And so I'm excited for companies to start taking advantage of these capabilities. I think we can save them countless hours, and a lot of companies today are focused on cost savings. We think that this will help with that as well. And then there's a lot of capabilities in SharePoint that I think haven't reached all of our customers because they require a lot of manual curation and usage and knowledge. And I think this helps bring those capabilities to a lot more people. I saw an amazing demo by Sean Squires last week and the week before around how you can leverage document libraries and content types and Power Automate, and then all the wonderful work we've done around file previews and file understanding to really produce some incredible solutions for our customers. It was sort of, amazing to see, almost 2 decades of work with a lot of new innovation, bringing all these things together in powerful ways.
The other thing that I'm hopeful of is there's some people who, shockingly enough, may not have looked at SharePoint at all, or may not have looked at it for 10 years. The stuff that we're bringing out with Cortex, if people are moving away from legacy platforms into Microsoft 365, there's, all of this baseline stuff that we've been landing last 4.5 years. Through all those modern experiences and being able to sync and shortcut libraries into OneDrive and the Power Automate integrations, the formatting. I just really think, I'm sort of jealous of people who are going to see it all for the first time, because I think there's a really big wow factor there. And, kudos to you and your teams.
I totally agree. Even things like using managed metadata and terms, I think were things that a lot of people weren't aware of or were, difficult to operationalize at scale. And I think that these are amazing capabilities. People should be using them.
In addition to the news that's coming out of the Cortex project, Mark, I know that there's some other updates that are coming that you've been working on with lists.
Yeah, Omar, we want to get your take on, we've had a number of your team members on the show recently with a couple episodes focused on Microsoft lists, really to define, what they are, the initial components people would see in the service. And now at Ignite, we're revealing a little bit more around some of the things that the team has been working on. But I'd first love to just get your take on this transition, like you and Chris were just talking about, moving from core components of SharePoint from an enterprise content management space that really is evolving to how Cortex takes advantage of that, what Cortex adds new for that space. But in this notion of managing information, what we thought of as SharePoint lists for quite some time are now evolving. What's your take on what they're evolving into, and maybe some of the guidance you're providing to your team to ensure that we do X or Y for this new generation of people who may for the first time be using lists in any capacity?
Yeah, lists is really interesting, and it's a really fun product. It's funny because when we announced lists a couple months ago, there were 2 reactions I got in my Twitter feed. One is, oh, thank God, you're making something I love and use today, SharePoint lists, 10 times better. And I'd say we've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years. And every conference, whether it's European SharePoint Conference or Ignite or even the SharePoint Saturdays, there's always a lot of enthusiasm for making things that people use better. But the other reaction were from people who didn't know anything about any of this and just saw Microsoft Lists was something new and got all excited about the capabilities that Microsoft Lists will provide. We have this fantastic new icon. It's super colorful and playful, and the product itself has very much a sort of consumer look and feel. So when you first experience it, you're hopefully amazed by what it can do for you. And that's a fun space to be in. My goal and my hope is that we grow our overall audience by providing a tool that maybe people didn't know they needed, or maybe they were using something from someone else to fill in those gaps, or maybe they had an Excel spreadsheet on their desktop that they can turn into more of a collaborative tool. And of course, we provide a great and easy way to do that just by importing from Excel. But I think the real power of lists will be, in the form of the templates and the home experience that we provide, so that people can see what's possible just by visiting the homepage and browsing around, the catalog of templates that we hope to really grow over time, so that you can get started with a couple of clicks. And that's something that, we've dabbled with in the past. Prior to my role working at SharePoint, I hear a lot about the various attempts and efforts to create templates and those types of things. But if you look around at products like Notion and Airtable and Monday, they start with a complete and exhaustive set of things that you can get going with. And I think that's kind of what inspires people to go, oh my gosh, I can automate this thing that I didn't even think about. One of my favorite lists is I have a list of everyone in my team and what their anniversary date is. At Microsoft, we celebrate 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 anniversaries. And what my list does is I have a Power Automate integration that takes a look at it every day. And if there's an anniversary coming up in 7 days, it emails my direct reports, giving them a heads up. And then on the day of the anniversary, it posts to Microsoft Teams a celebration note. And I've just found it's a really wonderful way for everyone in my team to celebrate in the anniversaries at Microsoft. And something that would have been a sort of chore to do manually, but it's now just on autopilot, doing its job like a good little robot. And it makes people happy, and it makes me happy.
I was going to say, I think it exemplifies maybe where we started, and what Chris and I know a lot about you is being a thoughtful leader, not only just remembering to do that, but putting the effort into what then it means to congratulate people for milestones, and just the awareness of it. The other fact is, my bet is that you didn't hire a consulting firm to build that application for you. That was something that maybe you asked a question or two on the Power Automate side. I'm not making any assumptions either way, but my guess is that might have been the learning curve. It would have been for me. But that's a prime example of what you can achieve. You knew what was possible, and you also knew what your goal was, and being able to achieve it, probably a few hours and a couple of tweaks here and there, my bet.
No, yeah, that's right. I used the templates. What do you call I guess I'm somewhere between no code and low code. What is it called when you search the internet and copy and paste stuff?
Yeah, that's leveraging the value and power of others and putting your own initiative behind it. Maybe that's the long form. We'll just call it the Omar space.
Yeah, it's Control-C, Control-V programming.
That's right. Well, I know two things that we did expose and share as news at Ignite, and I just want to get your quick reaction, because I think one exemplifies exactly what you were saying, is putting the art of the possible and the power in people's hands and just having them hit the ground running. That I see not only from the templates and the ease of use, but we're now putting out a preview of the Lists app for iOS that literally puts it in people's hands, and I think grounds it in what you can do, and that if it's that easy, and I think the application is beautiful, especially when you think of how you have worked with Lists on mobile before. But anyway, just get your quick take on the Lists app for iOS now in preview.
Well, it's very handy. I use it pretty much as a tool for referencing information I need access to on the go. In fact, many times when I'm sitting in front of my computer, like we've all had this experience where you can do something on your computer and you can do something on your phone, but you pick up your phone to do that thing anyway. A lot of times it's because it's faster, or maybe you're doing two things at once, and what you're doing on your computer, you want to look up something on your phone so you can just type it in. It's a lot faster than navigating to a website and doing all that stuff. So I think the List app will serve a really important function for people that use lists, that need to get access to information on the go. I also think it'll serve as an important tool for data entry and completion of list information. Sometimes I'm not at my desk when I need to update something in a list or create a new record in a list. Those are the types of things that we'll help people with initially. We'll continue to grow it from there based on feedback.
Great. I think a pretty significant announcement that we made, and we're framing it around being able to take your lists offline. I know there's a little bit more behind it in terms of not just being able to take your lists with you when there's either low or no connection to the internet, but there's a broader notion that maybe you can tell us a little bit about really the value of being able to do things a little bit faster, a little bit more offline. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means for lists and anything more you can attribute that would be okay to share on the podcast?
Yeah, so Project Nucleus is a very exciting and interesting project. The way it started was Jeff kind of challenged us, and Jeff does this very regularly, which is one of the reasons I love working for him, is he sort of challenges us for these really big and ambitious goals and then tells us that we should try and achieve those goals very soon. Usually he says next Ignite or the Ignite after. And I think that really helps the team come up with breakthrough ideas. His challenge was get performance to be as instant as possible, where instant is, say, sub-second, sub-500 millisecond, 300 milliseconds. We have some really smart people in our team, and they took that challenge and came up with this really innovative way to leverage much of the work we've done in OneDrive over the last couple of years by building a capability for offline access that also served the purpose of making things fairly instantaneous. If you don't have to make a network call and wait for that network call to return, you can do much more, much faster. And so, Nucleus is really about producing a experience that feels instant for all the interactions you might have on a list, which we know turns into delight. There's a lot of qualitative and quantitative data that says that performance is the number one feature, and people really appreciate it. And the way they reward you is by using your products more. So good for us and good for them. And then the second thing is it lets us support offline. Now, a lot of people think offline as I want to get on an airplane and I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z. But increasingly, as we've talked about even before the show started, networking is a big challenge. And much of the offline needs arise around unreliable or inconsistent network access. I experienced this in my own home, just traveling between floors. And so having the resiliency of being able to handle any kind of blip is one of the reasons that we also built Nucleus, so that we can provide a robust experience that doesn't degrade when your network is being unreliable. It's going to be really exciting to have a solution that fulfills this capability for lists, but I think also acts as a more general solution for people that build applications on top of lists as well. And I think that makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, I like the parallel that you drew just referencing OneDrive. I've heard the team talk about it as for what we do for files, we're now focused on doing it for lists, but it carries on to a lot of different scenarios. And I'll just put a little plug in for people to check out Lincoln Damaris' session where he talks about Nucleus and the offline capabilities. And he does a really nice demo on a list of 200,000 items. And he sort of pulls the plug on the network cable, effectively puts himself in airplane mode, and then does a whole bunch of stuff. And it's super fast and performant, inclusive of adding new items. And so I'll put a link to that so people don't miss it. But I think it's great to have taken that challenge.
Yeah, you should always watch a talk from Lincoln because they're super entertaining.
I agree.
Entertaining, energizing. It's one of the ways I think that kind of reflects that top-down commitment from Jeff to like, hey, go do things, go do big things. I think he really embodies that quite well. Let's talk about Microsoft Stream. Stream, I know, has been through lots of updates and changes that we're finally ready to reveal. We know we've been talking about content, whether it's documents or whether it's data and lists, and video is this increasingly important asset, especially in an era of remote anything. What are we saying about Stream at Ignite?
Yeah, it's great you asked. Stream is like a rocket ship in terms of its growth and usage and the excitement people have around Stream scenarios. But one scenario that we've heard a lot about is around meeting recordings. People are increasingly recording more and more of their meetings. There's a lot of good reasons for that. And we've been partnering with Stream over the last year to figure out how do we get Stream videos to have all the same wonderful characteristics and capabilities of a file that sits in OneDrive and SharePoint. And what we're announcing at Ignite is that we are bringing all the Stream meeting recordings into the OneDrive and SharePoint service so that when you record a meeting, that video will get dropped into either your OneDrive for the person that recorded it, which then you can then move to, a shared location or a team site. But that means it's going to inherit all the features that we have today. So features that Stream doesn't have. As an example, sharing has been an issue that customers have given a lot of feedback on. We have this wonderfully amazing, powerful, consistent experience for files, and that wasn't true for Stream videos. And so now Stream videos will gain the ability to have things like company shareable links, secure links, external sharing, so you can share videos with people outside your organization. We'll have things like the file card and analytics, as well as all the security and compliance capabilities, e-discovery, search, the list goes on and on and on. And so this is a great example of where we're going to provide a lot more value to customers for a scenario that's become increasingly important for the way people do work, the way they learn, and we hope to do much more. But we think this is a real tangible moment and step for our customers by delivering Stream meeting recordings on top of OneDrive and SharePoint.
And to my understanding, this is not a pause, wait until we get it in a certain state. This is additive when we make, this move to have Stream a little bit more, like you said, a file in SharePoint and OneDrive. They get a ton of benefit, and it's additive to everything that Stream was able to do before. So the leap ahead, I think, is amazing. Having managed this previously a couple of years ago, that was one of the number one asks, even a number of years ago, was just external sharing of videos. Make it easy, make it engaging. And to your point, if it's a real core scenario for teams, just Teams recordings and other videos you might share as a team, that's a no-brainer for the value that it'll bring for a team that's set with both internal and external people.
Yeah, that's right. Prior to me being in this job, I spent many, many years of my career working on sharing. And I can tell you that sharing is not the kind of thing that you want to repeat and build over and over again in multiple different services. And so because customer expectations and needs, get defined by the capabilities they tend to use the most, specifically around files and Office documents. So this will be great for that reason and more.
Great. I'd like to touch on two things that we shared, but it's pretty top level and pretty exciting. From a SharePoint perspective, we're delivering a company app within Teams, which I'd love for you to, just kind of share a little bit more what that is and maybe how the team went about it. And then I'd love to touch on after that, the leadership connection site, and really talk about that one in terms of a scenario-driven solution that brings together a lot of great technology. But first, the company app in Teams. What is that, and how did we approach building that?
Yeah, another really exciting project. So the company app in Teams is essentially a way to have your cake and eat it too. We know that a lot of customers love using Teams as a sort of centralized hub where their employees can launch Teams and find their, channels, their colleagues, their meetings. It's all in one place. We also have another wonderful capability in M365 around SharePoint, where companies build home sites and communication sites, destinations for their employees to discover resources, to consume news, to get to their applications. And so the company app in Teams is essentially taking those capabilities in SharePoint, including the branding capabilities that a lot of customers utilize to communicate in their voice to their employees, to bring that inside Microsoft Teams so that you can launch Teams. And just like any, team or channel you might find easy access to, you'll also have access to your company home site, as well as your company navigation and links. And it'll be audience targeted so that if you want to deliver unique content to employees in your organization in specific roles or locations, you will, for the first time, have the ability to do that inside of Microsoft Teams as well. And so this is a pretty exciting development, and we think will both take advantage of the scale at which people are consuming Teams, but also the significant investment many companies have around their SharePoint intranets so that you can discover, access, and navigate all that intranet content in that same application. And so that's what the Home app is.
That's great. To be honest, even being a part of the team, I hadn't really thought of that unique experience that we bring that you had mentioned that will be that personalized experience, not only when you go to the SharePoint site directly. If you were to go to our company portal today, you get your set of news and things that are personalized to you for content and all of that. not only do we know who you are when you sign into the site, but we know who you are signed into Teams. And I hadn't thought about it that way, that it's a unique set of content in all context, and that's a really important one. So that was kind of neat to listen to. So another specific deliverable is the leadership connection site that brings the best of SharePoint, Yammer, Stream, live events. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe from I don't know if to call it a template dumbs it down too much, but to talk about it from a solution or scenario perspective and how you went about that one?
That's another example of where rather than taking a product approach to solving problems, we took a scenario approach where leaders across most organizations, especially now, communicate on a regular basis to their organizations, whether it's a town hall or, a monthly meeting or, various different types of leadership events for different audiences. It could be a leader of a marketing in an organization. And so the leadership connection takes the social capabilities of Yammer along with live events and the ability to author and create web content and put that all into one place. Every organization can have a leadership connection site, and that site can be the primary way that leaders create live events and content to engage their employees across their company or within their company. And so we think this is, a great capability that sort of leverages the best of Stream, Teams, Yammer, and SharePoint all in one easy to deploy experience.
Yeah, that last part is key. Easy to deploy, meaning it doesn't take months to establish and make your own connections and get the integration working. I think that the team has done a lot to just have it work, but also provide the ability to design and configure to what is right for each business.
I also want to give you a chance to talk about OneDrive, which I know is a service that's near and dear to your heart over the years. Can you share with our listeners the big OneDrive news that we have coming out at Ignite?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we're introducing a feature and delivering to customers a feature that lets you add content from anywhere in your organization as a shortcut into your OneDrive. So this feature, one point in time, was called Add to OneDrive, and I think that's still what we refer to it as a sort of a shorthand description of the feature. But it's a very handy way for you to organize what matters to you in a simple and easy place without having to go find it and discover it or remember where it is. Having worked on OneDrive, as you mentioned, a long time, like the one thing I sort of been really clear over the years is that folders are quite possibly the simplest organizational construct ever invented in computing. Almost everybody that learns how to use a computer at some point creates a folder and puts files in it. They do that because it's a way to organize stuff around whatever organizational technique they're trying to employ. And with shared content, that has become difficult because shared content is scattered everywhere in an organization. Chris might have some really important documents about Project Cortex in his OneDrive, and Mark might have a bunch of important list information he's uploaded to the list team. I just want an easy way to take all the things that are important to me that belong to other people and keep them organized and straight in my head. Perhaps using a different organizational structure. And so Add to OneDrive lets me do that by simply clicking a button anywhere in a files experience that says Add shortcut to my OneDrive. And just like that, this now shows up. And whether you're syncing in File Explorer or the Finder on the Mac or using your mobile device, you'll always see that content the way that you've sort of put it into your OneDrive. And so we think that is going to be a breakthrough in many, many years in the making to make the product simpler. And that's kind of how it goes sometimes, is you work really hard for years and years and years just to make your product simpler, not by adding a lot more complexity.
And I think for the simplicity that we're also providing to admins, there was a big feature announcement that was very related to not only the syncing capabilities with Add to OneDrive, but syncing overall with the new sync reports, kind of similar to Stream. That's a long sought after feature that's now being delivered. Any thoughts on the sync reports and what we showed at Ignite that people should definitely know about?
Yeah, absolutely. Sync reports have been a long-standing request. Actually, if I go all the way back to my first MVP summit that I attended working on OneDrive for Business, one of our MVPs, actually, I think it was a set of MVPs, were adamant that this would be really valuable to them. A lot of them are consultants, and when they go into organizations, those organizations want to know things about OneDrive Sync. How is it working? Is it working? How many people have it? And so we're really pleased to be able to deliver those reports for customers so that they can understand the success of their deployments. I think that's kind of what some people wanted for is like, is the investment we're making working? How are people using it successfully? And are there any issues in our deployments? Networking is complex out there in the world, and there's a lot of issues that come up with how people's networks are configured. So this sort of helps them get some understanding of that.
Anything that can provide IT with visibility on who's doing what, who has access to what, and add to that just the value of seeing how people are leveraging it. It certainly, for a lot of our customers, is very okay for people to sync content and manage it within that distribution model for the sake of it is still secure, protected in the way that we promote, but just that visibility and being able to run reports off if anybody or any particular content needs to be a little bit more reviewed. I think your mention of the MVPs in the early days when we share a look at what we're doing or we're taking that feedback, it really is important that your team listens, even if they're longer dig projects. MVPs obviously know what customers are looking for and the pain points. And I know delivering on it does take time. So kudos to delivering this one.
Thank you. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting feedback on it.
Yeah, I think you will, and I think it'll be positive feedback. And of course, to always iterate on feedback as you always do. Last area before we sign off, because I know we've covered a lot, and I think in everything that we've been covering is one principle that I know you stand behind pretty strongly, that our technology should be accessible, both in the actual means of accessibility and what that means for people with any disability, whether it's vision, whether it's in any way. The other side of that is just the design principles that make it so that products are more friendly and more engaging. Across SharePoint, OneDrive, lists, elements that we'll see come from Cortex with some of the new things that pop up and light up for knowledge management, really across the whole team that you work with, there's this notion of a fluent UI and bringing more of a consumer feel to the commercial space, and that it's driven really strictly by what is right for the customer. Can you talk about how you present the overall design approach to your teams and then maybe how that's manifested in an example or two?
I'd say one of the things I'm most proud of and sort of inspired by is the role of design at Microsoft, and how we as program managers in many ways helped to co-own and actually allow design to take the leadership role in defining the product more directly and much earlier than we had when I first joined the company. And I think the work the Microsoft design team is doing is industry leading when you look at other companies who are doing similar work. And it's really been wonderful because designers are a small, tight-knit community in the company and can work together to look at our customer needs and our products in ways that help us create better outcomes, whether it's more accessible, inclusive design, or industry-leading, visuals, the art of the possible when it comes to how we craft our hardware and our software. And so that's been great. A specific example, which is really probably close to home for people who've been listening, is SharePoint, as an example, is a product that has a lot of panels in it. And panels are the things that fly out from the right when you're trying to configure a setting. But panels were a thing that we looked at when we were building lists and felt that we really didn't think that they fit as well as the other pattern, which is very common, which is dialogues. Now, as PMs, we could take the approach of being sort of convicted and since we have the authority and control, we can sort of just make decisions about stuff. But we took a very design and research-led approach to debating and also researching and studying what worked better, whether it was dialogues or panels. There are very passionate people in our team that felt strongly about one versus the other. We actually just concluded some research 2 days ago that I got to read, and it was just so heartwarming. One of our researchers produced an incredible report about some deep understanding they had about what people favored and why. And I know that we're going to make a really good decision for our customers because we took the time up front to debate, to study, to understand, and then commit to a design pattern that I think we will hold consistently across our product over time, even if that means we're transitioning between different experiences, because that's usually what's required in large, complex products like OneDrive and SharePoint. So that's an example, I think, of where we really do take a design, research, and customer approach to our product.
I saw that same report and really the emphasis you all put on, in the thread conversation. And I think one of the outcomes, I don't want to spoil what the outcome is, because I think there will be a delight to that, is the other part about it that comes along with, and we want to make this consistent all the way through the product. So where there might be a variable or there might be, we're trying one way versus the other, the ultimate decision that's data-driven and design-driven and probably just end-user delight-driven will then also be the experience that people then will know and expect, whatever that outcome is, which I think will be that delighter. So great example, and certainly thank you for sharing. I really take it to heart when we asked you not only to reflect on the blog that you had written, but how are you doing? And to have gotten this really nice extended answer in an honest way, both how you're doing and how your teams are doing and what they're designing, developing, and maybe even at this point in time with Ignite and all the news, kind of that fragile moment where it's like, and what do you think? So I know we will get a really great reception. And of course, in the mix of that, great feedback. I thank you for being on the show, but more so, thank you for leading the team and guiding them in a way that gives them a lot of confidence to do what they need to do and the flexibility to figure it out in the best way that they are seen, or the sense that they get from their customers in their individual feature or component spaces. So again, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It's, as I mentioned, huge privilege and responsibility to continue to work on this product. And it's always a joy to be on the podcast and chat with you, Mark and Chris.
Thanks, Omar.
Up next on the Intrazone, events. You're getting this podcast in the middle of Microsoft's biggest virtual event of the year, Microsoft Ignite. But we have lots of news to share about both Ignite and upcoming events around the virtual technology ecosystem.
So as live virtual agents, I just want to say, I am so happy to be at this point because Ignite has been a wonderful event to work on. But at this point in time, we've got a ton of blogs that are live. We've got a lot of sessions that people either can attend soon or can watch on demand already. And of course, a lot of news and announcements, most of what you just heard from our conversation with Omar. For the breadth of the company, Ignite is a huge milestone. Lots of time to get engaged, ask questions. We hope you listen to this episode on day one so you can be right in line with the news and hit it with some context. Certainly, if you hear this after the fact, we know that you've been in a wash of a ton of news across Azure, Dynamics, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Cortex. The list goes on and on. The company's been doing a lot, and we hope your Ignite experience is wonderful. If you are hearing this on day one, know that there's a ton of great content throughout the entire 48 hours. Lots of great guidance on what to go consume if you're looking at certain products or technologies. And if you're interested in getting a question answered, this is the time to plug in with all the subject matter experts.
It's hard enough to keep track of everything going on when it's 25,000 people in one mega conference center. The way that we've structured Ignite, there are some main tracks where there's a lot to pay attention to and things repeat, but it's really hard to absorb everything in real time. So if there's something that you missed, this is all recorded. There's extra sessions that are available on demand after the fact alongside. Over to Under Up With. Remembering the preposition list for my 6th grade teacher. So plenty to absorb online all through the magic of virtual event technology.
And not too long after, in middle of October, is the European SharePoint Conference. And I love that this is still going on because it is one of those in-person events that if you ever get a chance to go, it's always in a great location. It's always very well hosted and, of course, always great content. A little different this year. It is going to be all online, but there is basically the European SharePoint Conference 2020 online. And they are still putting together a great set of content. They have a lot of great and interesting events to plug in a virtual way. I'm getting involved on a pre pre-conference just on the Monday of that week, which is going to be focusing on a workshop for Microsoft Lists. I know we have a couple other workshops. Lots of other MVPs have workshops. Then there are 2 core days of sessions, some of which will be Microsoft sessions. A lot of them will be MVP and community-led. It's very oriented to the region. So we'll put the link in the show notes. Lots to come for the European SharePoint Conference, and it's a really great event team that we've worked with a lot in the past.
Coming up a little bit after ESPC, GlobalCon 4. That'll be in December 2020. So our friends at GlobalCon have done it again. Seems like just last month they were GlobalCon 3.
The one thing I know that they're doing that's pretty similar to GlobalCon 3, a little different than 1 and 2, is they have it split across a couple of different days that are not all in the same week. So they have focused on the different Tuesdays to have a single day of a certain specific type of content. So we'll put a link in the show notes that takes you to those 2 pre-days, and then their main event is in December, where you'll have 4 or 5 days of a lot of content. They do a really nice job. I think they were one of the pioneers of doing a true online all virtual event. GlobalCon 4 team has always been a great partner and always put together a nice, great conference. So another event in October is one very specific to Microsoft Teams called Teams Fest, and it's put on by a number of our SharePoint and Office 365 MVPs. And because it's focused on Teams, you're going to get all of what you would expect, talking about meetings and callings, collaboration, all the different ways that developers can extend on the Teams platform. And we have a role to play there too. I have a session that's focused on all the things you can do that are powered by SharePoint in Microsoft Teams. And the one that I'll really hero on is the new Lists app experience in Microsoft Teams. But if you really like Microsoft Teams and you really want to go to an event where you can go super deep and attend a ton of sessions, the Teams Fest in October, we'll put a link in the show notes and call out some of the specific ways you can get engaged.
So there's always more and more events coming as we get closer to the end of the year. Some will be from Microsoft, some are from our event partners. If you are planning an event, please let us know. We'd be happy to feature it on an upcoming broadcast of the Intrazone. Well, there you have it, wrapping up this year's Ignite edition of the Intrazone. We'll put links into our show notes about everything that we covered in today's episode. And of course, thank you to our guest, Omar Shahine.
You can check out our show page at aka.ms/theintrazone and our corresponding blog that we have all of these links and more.
If you're curious about other Microsoft shows like Sync Up, the show about OneDrive, check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts. Discover and listen to a new show today.
You can always email us at theintrazone@microsoft.com or on Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
And if you enjoy this show, please help us reach more people. Share that SharePoint love and subscribe at the local sandal shop or wherever you get your podcasts.
We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and you've been listening to The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Ignite influence like you've never seen intelligent internet.